There is a genuine question about whether Democrats at this point have made the point that they could make and should just come to the table. What say you?
Well, the reality is the question about health care has been an existential battle that we've been having in this country. And the Republicans have a point of view, and they're unraveling health care. Medicaid, we had $15 billion that was cut out of, actually, $15 billion that was cut. And now the Affordable Care Act is under threat. And in Vermont, we're going to see premiums go for some families that were paying $900 a month to be paying $3,500 a month. And the challenge that we have, and this is a responsibility on both sides, is to make health care affordable and accessible. And you've got to come to the table and have a discussion and negotiation if you're going to have an outcome that's going to save health care
Senator,
for folks.
I don't disagree that that's a valuable conversation and debate to be had. The question is whether that needs to be had in the context of shutting down the government. Meaning, do you need to have the leverage of a government shutdown and people out of work and people looking for second paychecks and people not getting paid? All of the attendant consequences of doing it this way relative to effectively keeping the government open and then having that conversation and debate on the floor.
That's right. First of all, let me acknowledge the validity of your point, a real concern, because folks are not going to get their SNAP benefits unless Senator Hawley and I are successful. The president has the ability with an emergency fund to continue providing those benefits, just like he's doing, so that we can provide pay for the military. But the reality here, despite your question, is that Republicans have refused for months and months and months preceding this deadline to have any discussion whatsoever about how we continue the tax credits for folks who are buying their own health care and where, because of the end of these tax credits, they're going to be facing these spikes of up to 300, 400%. So, you know, there's a responsibility here on both sides, but there's an obligation on both sides to have
Senator,
a discussion.
Let me ask you this just about the obligation piece, because the other component part of this is, you know, you have this bill now to try to keep SNAP benefits going. Ted Cruz has a bill now that he wants to pursue around, you know, keeping TSA folks employed and on the job and getting their paychecks. It seems to me we may be sort of creating a moment where we're going to have piecemeal component parts of the government that stay open and piecemeal parts of the government that we decide don't stay open, so that this then can extend and go on, in perpetuity. And that seems like a terrible idea, too.
Well, you know, I agree with you. I think shutdowns are terrible, and it's an indication, quite frankly, of the breakdown of the political process here. And you can cast blame on both sides, but this is the sixth time in 30 years we've had a shutdown. And recently, you've also seen debt ceiling crises where there's a threat not to default on our debt. So this is a serious indication of the breakdown of the process. But one of the existential fights here, beneath the surface, but really important to Americans, is the cost of health care. I mean, it has been rising way faster than inflation. It's a killer for small businesses that really have benefited by the Obamacare tax credits. They've been able to afford to continue to provide health care for the workers who they really value. So I'm with you on the overall critique of shutdown as a tactic. It really is not something that's desirable.
You can vote.
But there
vote.
is a real issue about health care.
You're always reasonable when you come on, and I've said I've said that, and you're almost conceding that you should not be shutting down the government, that the Democrats should not be doing that, and I don't think you'd ever say that extortion is the way that Republicans should get their way if they don't like the IRA or they don't like overspending or whatever it is at any given point in time where the other party has a disagreement. This is not the way to do it. As far as Obamacare, you probably realize a lot of these premium increases are just built into Obamacare. The expiration of the pandemic subsidies is only a very small part of the increases. So that discussion has to be had about fixes to Obamacare so it doesn't keep spiraling, the costs don't keep spiraling. But you know you're not going to do that before we reopen the government. It's not going to happen. It's going to have to happen afterwards. Are you ready to vote with the Republicans to reopen the government at this point as a reasonable Democrat? Maybe others would follow you.
You know, I'm not there yet because we have had literally, Joe, no discussion whatsoever about how we're going to deal with these
This is the right way to do it,
premiums.
Senator? By people not getting paychecks at the TSA? This is extortion. You think this is the right way to do it? In your conscience, you think it's the right way to do it? I never thought I'd say that, Andrew, that it, as a human being, he always says that. As a human being, you think this is the right thing to do? That's your line.
Well, that's why Senator Hawley on Have Our Bill to make sure that folks get the nutrition that they absolutely need is why the president is paying the troops. But there is something that we've all got to acknowledge here, okay? The administration has had an attack on health care, as we know it. The Medicaid cuts were immense. They're going to have real impacts on individuals, and they're going to have impacts on state budgets and community hospitals. The loss of the premium tax credits is going to mean that folks are going to drop health care. I mentioned in Vermont, it goes from like $900 for some folks a month to $3,200 a month. That's totally
Senator,
unsustainable.
from $900 to $3,200 a month is not because of the tax subsidies alone. The Journal points out that the tax subsidies, these extended tax cut subsidies, are only responsible for about the expiration of those are only responsible for about 3% of the increase. That's peanuts. You still have a huge problem. You still have a lot of people who aren't going to be able to afford health care.
Well, first of all, I want to acknowledge you're right about that. I think it's much more than 3%, but the cost of health care. And if we're sitting down and talking, there's a number of Republican ideas about how to bring down the cost of health care other than by throwing people off of health care insurance. And if both sides were willing to face this, there'd be some acknowledgement that we've got to do something about PBMs. We've got to do something about prescription drug pricing power. We've got to do something about excessive utilization. So the real conversation should be about how do you make healthcare accessible by making it more affordable. Yes. And the approach that we've been taking so far is to throw people off of Medicaid and now throw people off of Obamacare.
Would you agree with the idea?
You're hearing my frustration.
I hear you, and I hear your frustration on this. Would you agree with some of the Republicans we've had on our air who say part of this is that you can't have zero payment premiums, where people are enrolled in these and have zero up cost? Even if you give them a $10 or a $15 copay, would you be in favor of that to make sure that it's a reduction of fraud, that you're not putting people onto these rolls who don't even realize that they're on these health care programs?
The evidence is conflicting on it, but I would absolutely be open to looking at any reasonable proposals that can make health care affordable by not having as the way to do it throwing people off of health care. That's the real issue here. And the point you just made, that's a reasonable point for discussion, but if we're not even allowed to sit down, and that's all really within the control of President Trump, you know, I've talked to many of my Republican colleagues, hey, how do we work this out? Because the folks who are going to get hit and hurt are a lot of folks who voted for President Trump. It's not just like a Democratic deal
no doubt.
here.
Well,
so they're open to having these discussions, but the president won't give them permission to do that.
Well, a lot of people are saying, where is Trump? I mean, he is over in China trying to do a trade deal that he thinks is going to benefit Americans. While this is happening back here, it really doesn't have anything to do with him. There's a clean CR sitting on the desk of Chuck Schumer in the Senate.
Well,
right. Okay. If it was,
sure.
If you could get a 1-year extension, is that all you really want? Do you want a 10-year extension for $345 billion? What's the $1.5 trillion, Senator? What the heck is that? And why do you want that?
No, your point is, I'm not asking for $1.5 trillion, but you make a good point about a year extension because, as you know, these premium increases notices are going out now. And it is going to be drop dead for folks making decisions in November and December.
So that's what you want.
And there's no time. No, at a minimum, we've got to get it extended because there's no time for states who have to administer this to be able to make the adjustments that are required. And that's where the president could make a phone call. I get it.
He could say, we'll do it.
He's busy doing other stuff. He can, and that's what my Republican colleagues say. Hey, I'll talk to you, but we got to get permission from the president. That's the bottom line. It shouldn't be that way, by the way. We're all independent actors here in the United States Senate. We should be able to do things without permission.
The precedent, Senator, is that, the Democrats had this thing, it was only 3 or 4 years after the pandemic. It was going to lapse. You knew that. So you think it's so because you want $40 billion now to extend it. You think you say we want this, we're not going to. That's not the right way to do it. We want this, or we're not going to reopen the government. You have to do this because we screwed up 3 or 4 years ago when we passed it in the first place.
Well, let me challenge that, okay? Because those premium supports did expire. But in COVID, we had utilization going way up and we had employment going way down. But since COVID, the price of health care has continued to escalate and wages have not kept up. So there's practical challenges here that families and small businesses face that we want to address. Okay. So I get it about a shutdown, okay? But let's talk. That's the bottom line.